Good day and welcome to the program this midday. I'd like to inform our viewers, if you're watching us, we are beaming live on the web, that's CRTV web, or you type www.facebook.com/CRTV web. Then you get Press R Live this Sunday afternoon. We started a couple of weeks back. Good day and welcome to the program. Much has happened in the country. The National Assembly has ended the first session of the year, or the March session, with a number of bills, about 8 of them adopted. They are now waiting for the president to promulgate that into law. And during the course of this session, Parliament debated, and there were questions and answers session on the role of the Parliament itself. Government was questioned on a number of issues. Today we've decided to pick on 2 of those things that will happen at the National Assembly and within the country. You know, the Minister of Territorial Administration came out strongly the other day condemning the report published by a certain non-governmental organization. We've decided to focus on the role of these non-governmental organizations in conflict situations today, and to talk about decentralization and see how the voting of the bill will bring part of the solution to the problem which the country has been going through in the Northwest and Southwest. And to discuss that with me on the program this midday, we have Peter Ngotayo. You're welcome.
Welcome, Joe.
You seem to be the shoo-shoo of the program these days.
I'm not.
Okay. That's Paul Yombo. You're welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Prince Ekoso, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Quite some time you haven't been on Press R.
Yes, thank you for inviting me today, and I'm grateful.
Okay. And Dr. Norbert Su, you're welcome.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
Okay. I'd like us to begin with what we usually begin on. That's what the papers have been feeding on, our press review, since yesterday.
The stories covered by the papers this week were varied. The lone bilingual daily Cameroon Tribune concentrated on government's actions, while the private tabloids piped on societal issues, particularly the ongoing socio-political upheavals in the Northwest and Southwest regions. Cameroon Tribune opened the week with the voting of the bill on decentralization at the National Assembly, intimating that it was a step in the right direction in the coming into being of regional councils. Talking about regional councils, the Guardian Post of Wednesday, April 10th, highlighted what is called the outburst of the eldest member of the Senate on the fact that the bill on decentralization had not gone far enough in handling preoccupations that could calm upheavals west of the Mongo. The same story was carried by the Median, who qualified the reaction of Fon Mukete as an onslaught on the BS regime. The Post-Weekender carried a series of reactions from Mukete's dissatisfaction with the bill, and according to Senator Emilia Keze, it took 6 decades for the senator to finally speak out. In another write-up by Victor Epiengome, it says it was inconsequential, and retired Justice Ayapol simply said in quotes, "Na crocodile tears all." Friday's edition of Cameroon Tribune reported widely on the audience granted to the French ambassador Gilles Thibault. The breaking news newspaper, on its part, headlined on more solutions to end Anglophone crisis with the question if a referendum is rigged. The Horizon dwelled on the Maurice Kamto affair, saying that Kamto's lawyers had taken Biya's government to the United Nations for arbitrary detention. The private English daily of Thursday, April 11th, questioned whether Bamileke CRM supporters were chicken-hearted or simply protecting their economic interests. The article in page 3 also demands why can't Kamto's supporters march in support of their leader. In cultural news, a couple of English-language newspapers reported that Festac 2019 opened in Limbe on a popular note despite threats from Anglophone separatists. And we end our review this weekend with this interesting religious story from Bamenda. The Guardian Post talks of an 11-year-old female student ordained pastor in Bamenda after close to 4 years of drilling from the founder of the church. But the 11-year-old's calling is, according to the article, a curiosity in the town, as the population is yet to come to terms with this phenomenon. Those were some of our top stories that made news this past week.
I'd like us to begin with non-governmental organizations. They seem to be a hot potato this time, especially what they churn out, what they're supposed to take, and so on. So many people are asking the question, what are these NGOs? Are they interest group? What are they? How would you define an NGO, for example?
I would define an NGO as an institution set to solve a particular problem. That's all.
Institution, governmental, interest groups, or what are they?
Particular problem to solve. You have a plethora of them all over the world.
Are they interest groups?
Some of them are interest groups.
Okay.
Some of them are interest groups. That's why some of them are sponsored by donors.
Okay. And
most of them live on what we call donor sponsorship, and they have their mission to do.
Okay.
You know, there are thousands of them, and I can name them all.
Okay.
That are out to solve specific problems within society. One could be human rights. One could be a disease. Okay. One could be fighting for democracy. One could be promoting a certain cause.
Okay. You just talked earlier on about how some of them get funding. How do they sustain, and which spheres of influence do they define for themselves?
Joe, one thing I'll tell about international organizations and organizations, they have a specific problem to solve. Until they solve that problem, they cease to exist. So when you're talking about funding, they have donors.
Okay.
Donors are a set of very prestigious people who have a lot to give because they want their names to be branded. That's why you have organizations in countries and they have three purposes. The first purpose is satisfy donors' demand. You're giving me $1 million to save children. I have to report to you and make you look good. Your job is to make the donor look good. The second thing is you have to also sound and get the public buy-in into your programs and say you're doing a good job at solving problems that affect children. The third one is you have to also win government confidence.
Okay.
And the three parties you have when you're doing work with international organizations,
okay,
NGOs or whatever you call it.
So when you talk about what you say, it looks more like you're talking about international NGOs. Do you have NGOs that have local spheres of influence?
We have NGOs that are in people's handbags.
What does that mean?
That's what I mean.
Okay, individuals.
Yes. It all depends on what you want. The whole idea of creating an organization is because you have something to solve.
Okay.
And the people, there are just a million of them because they know the UN and other bodies have free money to give.
Okay. So why do they call them non-governmental organizations?
Because they are non-governmental, because they are non-profit. But the truth is that they make profits.
And from every indication, these are institutions that have come to stay.
Some have come to stay, some have very short lifespan.
Okay. All right. Let me move to Paul. How would you categorize these local international organizations? Those, like he just talked about, they have spheres of influence and specific things which they have been made or they have come into existence to handle. Now, when you look at these non-governmental organizations, how would you qualify their operations, especially the international organizations?
Well, as the co-panelists just said, there are a plethora of different international organizations, and every single one of them has a specific purpose and has a specific modus operandi. They're international organizations that publish reports, and through their reports they want to shame and name. They're international organizations that organize seminars, that organize training, that work for peace, that are in the domain of advocacy. So every single set of international organizations, following their objective, following their domain of activity, will have different modes of operation and will express itself differently on the field.
Okay. Now, do you have situations where non-governmental organizations move out of their spheres of influence or defined domains, for example?
Very often, very often.
Okay.
The idea of non-governmental organizations, they really took root in the beginning of the 90s, after the idea of liberalization became silent phage. So Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, the falcons of liberalism, were in power. After the structural adjustment programs, the idea that the state needs to step aside from the economy. So sometimes foreign powers.
That's the triumph of capitalism.
Exactly. Foreign powers that because of this new tendency, can't officially intervene into local affairs, sometimes create international organizations as proxies to do so. This is very clear when you look at the financing, as the co-panelist just said, of certain international organizations. They're clearly associated with certain interest groups that might explain sometimes what they say and what they do.
Okay. When you hear what they say, would you say that we have fake non-governmental organizations existing alongside more credible ones?
Well, Joe, I want to answer your question from a very aside perspective from what my co-panelists have just said.
Okay.
I think
you want to comment on what they have said before you take my question? Maybe?
Well, I don't need to really delve in what they have already said.
Okay.
I just want to go straight to answering your question.
All right.
I think that society has a number of problems, and those problems are actually very, very practical in its the way they manifest themselves. Yeah.
You know,
and as such, it becomes very burdensome for government to be able to handle all those kind of problems. And in as much as government cannot handle all problems, there are other areas or other expertise that come out to be able to solve those problems. And I think that that's the role that NGOs play, whether it is international or local NGOs. And therefore, we must concentrate on the problems and the objectives of those NGOs, if actually they are responding to their objective or not. Because if we go on to start castigating the role of NGOs or the role they are playing or the role they are not playing, we might be going out of the topic of this discussion.
No, so we've not gotten to that yet.
We must understand.
Nobody has said that.
We must understand that government cannot solve all the problems, and non-governmental organizations come in to be able to help to solve societal problems.
Before the existence of these NGOs, governments were there. So our government's operating.
The government can never solve all the problems. And that is one of the reasons why we have all the kinds of crises that we have in the society today, because government is trying to play a role that is unable to play. So therefore, these NGOs have the right to be able to do what they are doing, but they must do it within the context of their objectives.
Okay. Doctor, would you want to comment on what they said before I ask you a question, or you're satisfied with what they have said?
Well,
then I'll move on to my question.
I'm pretty satisfied, but we have to add a little bit of it. I want to say that NGOs are organizations outside government, and these organizations could be national, local, or international. And as they rightly said before, NGOs have objectives. They work on objectives, and their operation depends very much on the objectives that they have. Their ability to fulfill their objectives depends on the means at their disposal. I want to also comment that, as Prince Ekoso said a while ago, NGOs can be perceived as support organizations to government. They can also act as watchdogs on government activities. And they can, as I said, they can support government in one way or the other. They can raise awareness about the loopholes of a state, the loopholes of government to the international public and what's
or societal happenings,
yes,
not necessarily government action.
For sure. And they also have humanitarian objectives. We have a plethora of them around us. So NGOs could be considered, even religious institutions are NGOs. We should take note of that. You know, any organization outside government is considered
an NGO.
As a non-governmental organization.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Our churches are NGOs. Okay, let's now go, maybe that's where the controversy might come in. Would you say that these NGOs meet their objectives often?
What objectives do they talk of? In everything, you have got to set what you call key performance indicators, what you want to achieve, and how you achieve them, how you benchmark them. Okay. What are your objectives? They have to be clear. Your goals have to be clear at the beginning. Then when you say they meet the objectives, means that you are measuring those goals and saying, yes, we've met our objective. We set to eradicate malaria. So we've eradicated malaria.
Okay.
We set to... Now,
let me be specific.
Yes.
Do you have situations where the activities of NGOs become questionable?
Many.
Okay.
Many. I have worked in many countries, and I can tell you that some NGOs have been shut down by government. And most of the heads of those NGOs have ended up what being considered persona non grata, meaning that they've gone beyond the bounds of where they came in.
Okay.
You know what they're supposed to do, and they get into government. They get themselves into government. When you see governments start getting nervous about NGOs, know that the NGOs have surely overcrossed their bounds. I'll tell you one thing: it's not only in Cameroon. I hear that every day. I hear it everywhere in the world I travel. You get NGOs that come say we're going to achieve this, and government says come in, we're celebrating you, and 3 months after they sack them. It's not just NGOs, the UN. What about the UN? How many UN heads have been given persona non grata in countries because they overstep their bounds, and especially during election period, governments start getting so nervous with NGOs supporting, because NGOs have a duty to report back to donors and to the headquarters. And there's something they call cable. Cable, I'm just telling you. Yeah. They have something they call, every day you have a cable. You speak to a journalist, the next minute you're going to send a cable back to your headquarters without verifying whether the information you've heard from one journalist is true, because you want to be seen as doing your job. You know, you want to be seen as reporting. There's one thing about working for an NGO is that you have to be on top of your toes, reporting every day to show that you are relevant.
But it doesn't say report fake news.
It says report fake news. Joe, it's crazy. Diplomacy is I've told many people, and I keep repeating, all of that is part of diplomacy. When NGOs come here, they're part of the international organizations that are here. So they're also part of diplomacy. Whatever they report, only God alone knows. Sometimes they go beyond what they came here to do, and they're involved in many countries. What about NGOs that come to say they're eradicating malaria and they're out there mining diamond? We've had them in countries like DRC Congo, many other countries, Sierra Leone and all those places. NGOs come say, we are going to help government do this. And behind they're mining
side activities?
They're exporting diamond.
Can that not be considered as side activities?
NGOs have one thing when they're credible, is that they serve as what you call, they have the power of good offices. They have what you call good offices. They serve as, they have the power of advocacy, which is great. Then they have their good offices.
What does
government can use them to resolve conflicts. They can be like an ombudsman in a state where they are credible and people say, you're good. That's one thing they have. Use that power of good offices.
Okay.
Yeah, to resolve problems, to get the buy-in, to negotiate problems, peace. Everybody says, we want this NGO to come because both of us agree.
But sometimes the governments end up using these NGOs, and sometimes they castigate them.
Yes.
Yes.
The first question you asked, are there NGOs that reach their goals? There's an important example worldwide. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation almost completely eradicated poliomyelitis around the world. Greenpeace and the trafficking of whales at the coast of Japan. So there are international organizations and local organizations that do fantastic work for raped women, for child abuse. So that has to be said. But on the other side, there is a phenomenon where international organizations or local NGOs are used as proxies by other states that don't intervene themselves. I'll give a simple example. When you look at Cameroon Tribune or any other public news and you hear a call for candidacies, we want projects in this domain. Who defines the domain and who says that this domain is important for Cameroon's development? It's an embassy, so a government of another country that finances NGOs in a domain that it has decided will be beneficial for Cameroon. And then we see flocks of NGOs coming.
Which means that many of those NGOs are credible institutions.
They're credible institutions, but the issue that I'm raising is that what they're doing has been decided upon by another government.
Or a sponsor.
A sponsor, which in this case is an embassy. And in Cameroon right now, one of the biggest sponsors is the representation of the European Union, just not to name it. So when you look at the specific programs of the European Union and you see how they fix it, it's according to European Union foreign policy goals. So as a matter of fact, those NGOs act as proxies,
intermediaries,
for the European Union foreign policy.
So why will they decide to give the money through NGOs instead of giving the money directly to the government as they used to do some time ago?
Well, there are 2 or 3 reasons for that. First of all, the European Union still gives money to the government. There's a Fed program which is very, very large, which is billions of francs, which goes directly to the government. But second of all, there are domains of intervention through which the Cameroonian government isn't best placed to intervene because it isn't close to the local population. Because NGOs have the specificity of being small and close to the population. So sometimes they're better placed to impact change in the society.
Okay, you wanted to chip in? Towards that?
Yeah, Joe, what I want to say is that I will continue to maintain my position that societal problems can never be solved by government alone. And in as much
you have said that before.
Yes,
I was thinking about why international institutions, countries, and so on and so forth, or individual donors who prefer to go through NGOs than give the money directly to government.
The reason is simple, because
people.
Government cannot solve all the problems. And we have example of our country, because from all the discussions that is going on, it will appear that we are specifying our discussion on Cameroon and why NGOs in Cameroon.
We are talking about international organizations and not Cameroon alone.
I am saying that from all the discussion that I've heard from the
it could be an example because we are living in Cameroon.
That's why I want to go also with the same examples. So if we look at the situation in Cameroon per se, we will understand that government cannot be trusted with all the responsibilities in the society, even in the domain of financing, because we know about corruption in this country. And when you give money to someone who is corrupt, you just understand that the money will not go through the right channels, or the money will not be used in the way it's supposed to be used. So international NGOs or local NGOs come to play a role in the lapses of the government. And I think that it is to the good of the government because, for example, when we talk about the Millennium Development Goals, like my co-panelists mentioned, and the fact that certain diseases have been closely eradicated in our society.
Almost.
Yes, that's why I say closely. Almost eradicated in our society. It must be looked from that perspective. We must look at the positive side of these NGOs and to see the work that they are doing, than to be talking about Sierra Leone and other countries, what our NGOs are doing mining. As a matter of fact, they are even government institutions in Cameroon, or government personnel who actually go into private business, which is not supposed to be so. So those are the things that we must be able to look at. We should look at the positive side of this NGO and bring out the strength of this NGO and encourage them to do those things that will be able to solve the problem of our society. For example, the refugees crisis, the internally displaced in Cameroon today. Those are the things that we should be talking about and see who are the NGOs that are involved in it and how they are doing it and how effective they are doing it.
Okay. He just mentioned, why are some of their reports very controversial?
Well, I think that the report is controversial perhaps to the eyes of those who want to see controversy somehow. But then I want to say that in the categories of NGOs, we have politically inclined NGOs. And I want to believe that that is where you are tilting to, because we know that politically inclined NGOs are likely to formulate controversial reports, in quotes. And it's in the right of every state or every government to accept or reject a report formulated by an NGO. Now, it is quite important, as Prince was trying to say, to investigate the groundwork of the NGOs. The idea of controversial reports of NGOs stems from whether or not their method was based on objectivity or whatsoever. Why do we say that a report is controversial? It could be said to be controversial because it is one-sided. It does not paint the true picture of a scenario or of a situation. So it is definitely, sometimes important for us to think that in as much as NGOs are called upon to produce objective reports, meaning that they shouldn't be biased in their report, we should also sometimes see what is good about reports that NGOs have produced to kind of improve on a situation that we are going through. Okay. So the idea of controversy of reports produced by NGOs, perhaps Crisis Group International, or
maybe objectivity is subjective. Yes, well, in terms of the reports.
I have something to say specifically about the reports, because international NGOs sometimes are very selective in the cases they choose and what they decide to portray. There's no NGO that has produced a report on the death of Thomas Sankara. No NGO has produced a report on the death of Muammar Gaddafi. No NGO has produced a report on the death of Patrice Emery Lumumba. People who are fighting for Africa, for example. I don't hear NGOs coming around every single day telling us about certain countries, oil-rich countries in the Middle East. But these same NGOs every single day are very prone to castigate, to insult sometimes overtly certain governments.
Can it not be said that it's because they are not in those countries, or they are supposed to be there?
When you produce a world report, you choose to be in a country. You choose to be in a country, and you choose to produce reports at certain moments of a country's history.
If the country refuses to accept
what I'm saying is not that what the NGO is saying is false. What I'm saying is that they choose to highlight certain things at a certain moment. And I think it would be blind for us Africans not to see that.
Okay. Peter, you wanted to chip in something? Why is it that they don't report on certain countries?
Well, it depends on whether they are represented in those countries.
Are there some countries who have said, we don't want you?
Many countries. Sure. Many countries have rejected NGOs. Many countries have rejected even UN organizations.
Okay.
Many countries don't want the UN peacekeeping issues. Nobody wants them.
In spite of
nobody wants
crisis
them.
Or problems that they're going through.
It's the worst thing that can happen to a country. To accept those peacekeeping elements in your country, it destroys your economy. It destroys your political system, it destroys your people, it hikes prices, it changes people's lives, it brings misery all over the place. Nobody wants them. The truth is that some NGOs, like the other panelists say, some of them are very good. Some of them are very good at what they're doing, and they are sincere, but others have a hidden agenda. They come in
depending on the sponsors.
When they're sponsored, because when they say who pays the piper
calls the tune.
Okay,
thank you. I'd like us to leave it at that and move on to our next issue, and we get the kicker from Esther Kima at the close of the parliamentary session at the National Assembly the other day.
The curtains have been drawn on 30 days of legislation and control of government action, this to the satisfaction of House Speaker Honorable Kavaige Jibril. He praised the scrutiny and adoption of 8 bills, amongst them that which establishes the regional councils, an option to accelerate the decentralization process.
We are completing the decentralization process with the setting up of the regional assemblies. They will have budgets, they will get into the development process on a higher level than the councils.
This is what we are expecting, that the people should be able to take into their hands the responsibility of developing their regions. And for the bill on the petroleum code, I would like the issue of taking into consideration the various communities in their division from where this oil is coming from.
As the House Speaker harped on the crisis in the Northwest and Southwest regions, he enjoined the international community and media organs to provide objective reports on human rights violations and the impact of the upheavals, issues hitherto raised by the lawmakers before governments.
It has to do with the low execution rate of the public investment project. We wanted to know from the Prime Minister mechanisms that have been put in place to see that after maybe this crisis, those projects will be executed.
People are dying every day. People are having their houses burnt. Schools and hospitals are being burnt. We should be thinking about talking to people, bringing them out of the bushes, seeing how we can solve this self-inflicted wound.
While the House rose in memory of the SDF Chief Whip, Honorable Joseph Batnazim, the lawmakers leave for recess with a pledge to fund the Sahel Solar Pump project, worth 4 million CFA francs, and to be crusaders of peace.
Okay. Let's move on to our next issue, and it's the hardcore. What does decentralization as a political concept mean?
Well, decentralization can be considered as a process within a state that involves the transfer of power or part of power from the central government to local entities, to municipal entities, and to any other body outside government. So decentralization also has an economic, an educational, and of course sociocultural dimension in terms of giving the ability, the capacity, and the resources to bodies outside government to be able to utilize them to meet
outside the central government.
Outside the central government, thank you very much, to be able to utilize them to meet up certain objectives they've set for themselves.
Okay, you made mention of a number of economic, education, but you didn't talk about political power.
Political too. I started by talking about political when I talked about local councils or local government, if you like. Okay, now we have in Cameroon 10 regions. These regions could be considered as decentralized bodies within which we have sub-units which more or less have the powers to run their own affairs. It's quite true that they don't have those complete autonomous powers, but then I think that the process of decentralization that has been engaged in this country is a gradual one. It's a gradual process.
Is there something like quick decentralization and gradual decentralization in political discourse?
Yes, some people make that distinction between the quick and the gradual one. You know, decentralization, as I said, is a process, and as a process, it has to be gradual, to my point of view, because going about it swiftly or in a sweeping manner may lead to more trouble, because you need to take time to examine, you know, the intricacies involved in the entire process.
Okay, and when you say take time, do you define the time you have to take?
Well, we cannot certainly define the time, but the time will depend on our ability to measure how ready we are, what capacities we have, what resources we have for decentralization to really be effective.
Are there any instruments that can be used by political experts to measure those readiness, or how fast they can go, or how slow they can go?
There might be instruments, and the instruments can be related to the ability of people, that is, knowing the cognitive ability of people to be able to run themselves.
Okay.
It could be related to the level of education, the technical know-how of managing local affairs, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
And finances
that sounds quite
too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Would you want to chip in something in terms of the definition and what the concept means?
Yeah, let me say that his definition is very right, and but within the context of Cameroon, and from what he has explained so far, I think that there's a very big problem with the definition in Cameroon about decentralization. We have
you want to define it otherwise?
Not all decentralization.
Do you want to define it otherwise?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, then give us your own definition.
Not all decentralization has a federal system based based system, and not all, but all federal system based system is decentralization, and the one that we have in Cameroon is one that is centralized decentralization, and which is causing a lot of problem already. Joe, one of the things I would like to tell you is that each time you invite me on this panel, I feel that I am indebted. I'm indebted to Cameroonians, and I'm indebted to the world.
That's why I asked you the question, and that's why you are a political leader. So give us your response, or your thinking about it. Yeah.
Can you allow me to talk?
Go ahead.
To say the truth, because it is only the truth that can be able to set us free. We cannot
tell us the truth.
We cannot define a policy of government, and we wait for 23 years. This is Dr. Su, with all the competence that he has. We cannot wait for 23 years to be able to implement decentralization with competent people like Dr. Su, with competent people like you, Joe.
I'm not a constitutional expert.
No, Joe, you are a citizen of this country. When I'm explaining my fact, allow me to explain my fact so that the people can learn. Therefore, yes, Joe, you're a Cameroonian. You're a Cameroonian, and you have the full right to be able to assume responsibility within the context of Cameroon. So that's what I'm trying to say. We cannot wait for 23 years to implement government policy. it is actually a game which we think that it has already hooked those who are trying to implement it on their necks. The definition of decentralization, per what Dr. Su defined, is okay, but the definition of decentralization in Cameroon context is not right.
Okay, all right, that's your opinion. I'll come back to you shortly, but what do we mean in Cameroon when we talk about decentralization? Is it what he has defined that we are implementing, or it's something else?
Okay, in Cameroon, the constitution of the 18th January 1996
yes,
defines Cameroon as a unitary decentralized state. And then a couple articles later, it says that the decentralized units are the region and the local council. It says that these two entities enjoy local autonomy and moral personality morale.
Moral personality to administer local affairs. So that's what the law says. We waited for 4 years after that constitution for the 2004 laws of decentralization that modified the 1974 laws that already existed, that now specify what are the specific attributes that the regions and the councils will have. So that now in 2011, the Prime Minister signed a decree to complete those laws, and now we have the new laws which were adopted by Parliament. So that's the Cameroon infrastructure for decentralization. Yeah.
And so in the Cameroon definition of decentralization, it's important to note that there's also there are other forms of decentralization. There's decentralization by services, for example. So when the Cameroon government decides to give a concession of water to a company, it's a form of decentralization. And just to chip in a bit on the political debate, I think that the issue of decentralization, I'm very wary of panaceas. And in the Cameroon public debate for a couple of months, couple of years already even, decentralization has been presented as a panacea, as a solution to all our problems. I think that decentralization with the same men which we have now might not be the solution. We might just decentralize the problems we have at the central level.
That sounds quite interesting, and it almost made me to quip or to smile. But when you hear them talk, and you see Parliament did vote a law on decentralization, the President of the Republic is supposed to promulgate that law, that bill into law, and you've just gotten the definition of it, the worry of it, and what it represents within our context. And the question which many people are asking is, can this be the key to many of the issues which have been put on the table?
I want to register my sympathy to the colleagues and on this show. The truth is, you see, the whole thing, I look at it from the perspective of leadership. The greatest thing in leadership you can do is to delegate power. Great leaders are those who can delegate power. And the other thing about it is that in the area of the decentralization, you talk about devolution of power. That's the language you use at that level, which means government is ceding some of its power to local councils. But now the
central government.
Yeah, well, government, central government. But what I like, what Prince Ekoso is simply saying is it intentional? That's the problem. Is it intentional? You must be intentional. No matter how much are you making a case, government has to make a very strong case and show people that it's intentional. I've heard the Minister of Decentralization speak over and over and over in this thing, but we're not saying this is happening. People don't understand what it's about. The man in the street is asking, what's in there for me? The first question, you've got to make a case. And make a case to a point that everybody says, what is in there for me? That's not what I'm hearing.
Okay.
Because Prince Ekoso will not be speaking. He has seen something there for him or the other colleagues there. The truth is that Professor Su gave a very sound definition of it. But whether you like it or decentralization in Cameroon, decentralization in America, but is it intentional?
Okay. Now, he just talked about he has been using the word intentional, yes, for quite some time. How can government translate the intentions into concrete action for people to see that this is decentralization going on?
Well, on the 31st December 2018, the President of the Republic indicated in his discourse to the nation that he was bent on modifying the laws of decentralization to give the local authorities more power. Why was he saying this? Because when you look at the 2004 laws, the ability that the local authorities have to take in hand the development of their people is very limited. And that's why I was saying that presenting decentralization as a panacea might be a problem. Local councils, regions and the local councils don't have the same ability that the central government has to address certain issues. But the fact that they're closer to the people and supposedly more accountable to these people might induce them to be a more efficient vector for development. So what the government is doing right now is a good track. So the government has adopted the laws. We're waiting for the promulgation. Then we'll have the regional elections. What we just hope is that there will be effective transfer of competencies to the regions. Because the 64 competencies that were penned down in the 2004 laws have been transferred to the councils. Done. Now the competencies to the regions have to be transferred, and the financial resources equally have to be transferred. Just another point, if you permit that, on financial resources. In Cameroon, there are basically two principal financial resources for communes. They're what we call additional taxes, the surplus tax, centime additionnel, that's how we didn't call it, or impôt communal soumis à péréquation. It's what FECOM handles and what FECOM redistributes in form of communal equipment. That represents a very small percent of the government budget. Then there's the DGD, Dotation Générale de la Décentralisation, that's 10 billion francs. This is insufficient for there to be real decentralization. So if the government is really bent on decentralization, it needs to augment significantly the amount of money that every entity will have.
I hope you've listened to MPs talk and the politicians talk.
Yes.
If we take Cameroon, for example, and we say this is Yaoundé, and we see the regions and see the councils, will you say the devolution of power is progressive at the level of the region?
Yes.
It has certain competencies which the local councils don't have.
Exactly.
And they are supposed to assist the local councils in trying to carry out the development at the council level and that of the region at regional level, or both have different competencies completely?
Well, let's put it this way. The law provides for bridges between these two. There's what we call intercommunality. And intercommunality is a system where two or three or more even councils at the same level create an organization that is going to be in charge of a competency that they deem that alone they can't handle. For example, 3 councils in Yaoundé have one big swimming pool. They consider that their individual councils aren't big enough to house a swimming pool and for it to function economically. So they decide to create another institution to which they delegate their powers. That's provided for by the law. The same thing at the level of the departments. So the law provides that. But specifically on the question of the competencies of the regions and of the councils, that's exactly what's going on. There are a certain number of issues that are common to a whole region. And at that level is the regional council that is best placed to tackle the issue. There are certain issues that are specific to a council, and there the council can act best.
Okay. One of the big problems which our councils have, and which might repeat itself at the level of regions, is to get representatives who can articulate their interest. And this, the political system we have does not allow for independent candidates. So it's political parties that present candidates for these elections. How do we do it in such a way that those who represent the people at the local levels and who can articulate their aspirations are those that are selected?
Well, Joe, I think that the basis of this question or this topic is to be able to solve the Anglophone problem. I think so.
No, we're talking about councils and
yes,
and
but I think this topic.
That's what you think, maybe
from the presentation of today's debate was decentralization as a means to be able to solve the problem going on in the Anglophone region, or not those.
Answer my question. I'll get to what you're talking about.
So let me be very contextual in answering the question. Because it would not make sense for us to come here and then beat about the bush without going to the specific problems for why.
I want you to answer this question.
This issue.
I know the next question that will be coming to you.
Now, the point is this: we cannot pretend to give power to the local population and then look for strings to be able to hold those same power back to ourselves. And that is what this decentralization that is being promulgated, or which is being articulated by government, that is what is intended to. Mr. Tayon just mentioned a while ago that government should be intentional in its action or in its program with regards to the implementation of policies. And when we look at it carefully, and the duration that this situation has taken, it proves to all Cameroonians, even those who are just born yesterday, that the intention of government has never been to be able to give local population the power. If you, for example, we are going to have the president of the regional council elected, and then at the same time we appoint a governor who supersedes the authority of the president of the regional council. So at the end of the day, we claim that we have given local population authority to be able to manage themselves. At the same time, we control them and manipulate them and bring them to a place whereby development cannot effectively take place because they are not the population. The person they have elected is not responsible for their development. It's somebody who has been appointed who is responsible for their development. And we know that appointees in this country have always been bottlenecks administrators that actually slow down development programs in this country. The country is rich. The country has enormous human potential and economic potential. But what has stopped the growth or the development of this country is because we depend on appointment. We depend on decrees. We depend on this decentralization that has not worked. I believe strongly that if government is intentional in solving the problems of Cameroonians, and specifically the Anglophone problem, we must go and revisit the issues of federalism. Federalism worked in this country before. Why are we refusing federalism? We must be able to be sincere to ourselves and be sincere to the people that we claim we are managing. Leadership, I always say that people who get into leadership responsibility without having the spirit of God, they will always abuse leadership and abuse the people. So therefore, we must understand that the stakes are too high for this country for people to come and play games on decentralization. Decentralization has not worked for 23 years. It is not now that it's going to work. Okay. Even if President Paul Biya signed all kinds of decrees, decentralization will not work in this country. The times have changed, okay, and we must change with the times.
Paul was itchy to react. Maybe you want to react before Paul? No. Paul, pick up the debate.
I wanted to talk specifically about the issue of governors and presidents of regions, because I'm not a political actor. I'm just a political analyst. And what political theory tells us is that decentralization works best when there's a supervisory authority. That's what we call in political theory the shadow of hierarchy theory. When every time you create a lower level of decentralization, you need to create a lower level of administration to administrate all those new units that are created. That's what theory tells us. I'm not polemicking on any political.
The theory doesn't work.
Okay. And the second,
excuse him, Lan.
The second thing is on the question of decentralization and federalization and federalism. Decentralized systems can be very free systems. It depends on how it's conceived. Look at Spain. Where there's will for autonomy, where the President Carlos Puigdemont of the Catalan region is right now in jail. It's a decentralized country, but it's a decentralized country where the regions have so much freedom and autonomy that they can act almost except with sovereignty.
So it depends on the content of the law.
Exactly, it depends on the content of the law. The name is only nominative.
Okay.
When you look at a system like Ethiopia, or other countries where you have a federal system, but where there's very tight state control. So what I'm saying is that the public debate should be fueled by passion. It should be fueled by passion, but it should also be fueled by some experience from what we see in other countries.
Okay, so it's in the name and not. It should be in what goes in the law and not in the name.
From the definition that doctor has given, I said that it was good.
Yes,
but in the context of application in Cameroon, it is not good, Joe.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The content, what has gone into the law.
That's right.
So it's not a question of federalism or whatever.
Yes.
But it's what
federalism
is in
has
the law.
taught us in this country that it works.
It works. As a constitutional expert, when you look at the debate currently going on and what they're talking about, local councils, regional councils, and so on and so forth. Now, when you see that we're looking at it as a possibility which government wants to bring into place to be able to give people in the regions, people in the local councils, the ability to manage their own affairs and see how they can better serve themselves with what they have and what they want for themselves. When you look at what is happening, would you see that can be that magic part of the solution to the problems which we are facing, especially in the Northwest and Southwest?
I think that is political systems are not static. So at a point in time, any method can be used to resolve crisis. So what we are going through, of course, the much talk about decentralization, the discourse on decentralization is also there because it has been seen that it can be part of a solution to the problem. So there is decentralization is out to improve accountability, to increase responsiveness, and of course to encourage participation of the local population in the decision-making framework. When we look at it from that perspective, it becomes interesting to think that we effectively need decentralization to make the local population feel part of the governing mechanism, at least at the local level. There is this political...
But we've not seen any council sanctioned the elected officials.
That's what I want to say. That's just what I want to say. There is this political principle of recall that I always like to talk about, that if we effectively implement it, the population will really feel that it is effectively participating. What is recall all about? This is a mechanism by which at any given time, before the end of the mandate of an elected representative, an election can be organized to bring down that representative.
Impeachment.
So I really believe that
an impeachment process, for example. Okay,
well, something of that
let
nature.
I'll come back to you. Teke has just moved in. So we have contributors online. So maybe your reaction or reaction of those who have been watching us. Yeah, Teke.
Yeah, just to indicate that the program is live on our Facebook page, and we have quite a good number of them. I've just selected a few. Concerning this topic, I don't think decentralization is going to replace the word dialogue in any way. First, the first immediate course should be to check before talking on decentralization, the process. The decentralization process, as for NGOs, they are playing a great role, and by sending out information which are vital to society and to the world, because now we know that what is actually happening on the ground, and the media may not actually expose that. That is from Asa Eman. We have Mary Kilachin, who says decentralization is the solution, but there is something we're leaving out, which is dialogue, and NGOs are also doing a good job. We should encourage them. And we'll take this last one from Ayang James, who says decentralization will not and may not be the solution. It's a cosmetic solution from Yaoundé. As for NGOs, they're doing a good job by giving us reliable information.
Okay, thank you very much, Teke. I'd like to begin the last round. How do you think that the process ongoing, it's a process so liable to change at any time, like you said, can contribute in solving the problems which we have in the Northwest and Southwest?
I tell people that you don't put money before strategy. The whole idea is strategy. Whether it's in the Northwest, Southwest, Littoral, West, whatever, you have got to give people voice. Voice and dignity is so important. The moment people have voice to do what they think is best for them, using their comparative advantage, then they are motivated and they want to get your buy-in. Okay. You see, the whole idea about people, whether it's decentralization, whether it's federation, is that people are eager to have a voice in the development of their own communities. People want to participate, people want to give their all, you know, and they're simply asking that, give us an opportunity to give our best.
Okay.
Shot.
All right. Paul?
There are new citizens emerging. There's a new form of citizenship and new citizens emerging in Cameroon. New online citizens, citizens that cannot be governed as citizens have been governed for the past 60 years in Cameroon. And so this new form of participation that we'll see with regional elections might be one of the new ways in which these new citizens might feel more included into their society. But for now, as the laws have been penned and as the men who are designing these laws are continuing to act, I doubt very strongly that decentralization will change anything.
Okay. Prince?
Yeah, I mentioned a while ago that all forms of federalism is also another form of decentralization, forms of decentralization. Mm-hmm. They have characteristics of decentralization. But not all decentralization has the characteristics of federalism. Mm-hmm. And I will go for the fact that as a federalist, I involved myself in the federalist movement in this country, which is well constituted. And I think we have experienced federalism in this country before, and it worked. I believe, and I am convinced strongly, that if we go back to the system of federalism, this country is going to be one of the best countries in the world. And again, one of the reasons why I think that the problems in the Northwest and the Southwest is happening is because, like Mr. Tayo mentioned, the people have not been given their full right to express themselves. And when the minorities,
the head of a political party,
the minorities are not given the full opportunity to be able to express themselves, then we have the kind of manifestation that we have right now in the Northwest and the Southwest.
Okay.
Therefore, there is need for us to be able to go by effective federalism in this country.
Okay, we said earlier on that it depends on what is in the law and not the name.
Yes, thank you, Joe. If I have anything to say is that though we talk much about decentralization, some people are talking of federalism, although the federalism at the time was centralized federalism, if I could put it that way. We should also take note sometimes of the risk of decentralization. In as much as we tend to celebrate it, we should know that it could also have some dangers. You know, Spain is an example. You know, when you give a lot of autonomous power, sometimes it can lead to, you know, tendencies of wanting to quit the main state. But all the same, I would like to say that the political culture of decentralization is not new among Cameroonians. Like he was saying, who had experienced federation a while ago in southern Cameroon, it was basically a decentralized system, so it's not new. So if we have to come back to it, I don't see anything wrong. But I want to strongly suggest that this principle of recall should be effectively implemented. That is something that will really give the ability to the local population to be able to influence the local government in an effective way. Okay.
How would you want it to be tested in the ongoing councils, for example?
Now, it's basically simple. You know, the presidents of the regional councils will be elected definitely. Mayors will be elected definitely. So if we could have a provision clearly stating that if they have a 5 years mandate, for example, we could have a provision clearly stating that the constituency has the right at any time when it feels that, you know, the elected representatives are not meeting
what is called elsewhere the vote of no confidence.
Yeah, we could call that vote of non-confidence. We could call that, well, impeachment is a very strong word. But then I think that is a powerful mechanism of control.
Would you want that at the end of the 5-year mandate, everything begins at zero? Or that we don't have an incumbent in office, for example?
No, not that at the end of the 5-year mandate everything starts all over. No, what I'm trying to say is that along the line, within the self-5 mandate, there should be not a moment. It's not automatic. There should be a possibility for the electorate to call back to question through elections an ongoing representative.
Which could be a vote of no confidence.
Yes, it could be something like that.
Or a vote of confidence on somebody, say, approving what he's doing or she's doing.
Exactly, exactly.
All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. There was no lady on the set for coming. We'll take the rendezvous for the same time next week when we'll be on with yet another in the series of our Sunday afternoon magazine programs, Press R. And until when we meet again, Tam Tam Weekend is coming up shortly. Stay with us if you can. Good day.